call. That was all the text said. One word. From my 14-year-old son, Eli. It lit up my phone during a client negotiation at the law firm, and something in my chest just stopped. Eli never texted me during school unless it was serious. My hands, steady from years in court, trembled as I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. "Mom," he whispered when I picked up. "They're moving our stuff. Grandma and Grandpa, they're packing up our rooms. They said Liam needs them now." For a moment, the air around me collapsed. I stared out at the Denver skyline through the tall office window, and I swear I could still hear David's voice in the back of my mind. This was our house, our son's sanctuary, my promise. And in that moment, I knew my parents hadn't just crossed a line. They'd declared war. And I was done playing nice. When David and I first stepped into this house, it didn't have walls filled with memories, just echoes. But he turned to me, grinning like a teenager, and said, "We'll raise our family here. Just wait." It wasn't fancy. A 2-story craftsman on the edge of Denver, with creaky floorboards and a leaky sink. But to us, it was possibility. We painted the nursery ourselves when I was pregnant with Eli. David insisted on drawing a terrible mural of a lion that still makes me laugh when I pass it. Later, when Caleb was born, we turned the guest room into a forest-themed toddler escape zone. Every room told our story slowly, imperfectly, but with love. Then, cancer came. It devoured him slowly. The last months were a brutal parade of hospital beds, whispered goodnights, and aching silences. But one afternoon, in the sunlit bedroom we used to call ours, he held my hand and said, "Promise me something." I remember the sunlight hitting his face, how thin he looked, how fierce his eyes still were. "Promise me you'll keep this house for them, so they'll always know they have a place. A place with you, a place with us." I nodded through tears. I couldn't stop. "Always," I said. "No matter what." That promise became my anchor. The boys lost their dad. I lost my husband. But this house remained. I took on more hours, argued tougher cases, made coffee at 1 a.m., and never missed a school play. I protected their peace, even when mine shattered. For 5 years, I kept things steady. Not perfect, but steady. And then came the first call from my mother, Judith. She cried real, wet tears, saying she and Dad had lost their retirement fund in a bad investment, that they were close to foreclosure. "We don't need much, just a place to get back on our feet," she'd said, her voice cracking. And how could I say no? They were my parents. I moved my home office into the laundry room and offered them the guest suite. For a few weeks, it was almost nice. Mom cooked. Dad tinkered in the backyard. The boys liked having Grandma around. It almost felt like the bustling family David had always wanted. Almost. Then the small comments started. Judith remarking, "It's such a big house for just you and the boys." Glenn suggesting, "It's lucky your grandmother's inheritance went to you, Vanessa, never got that kind of head start." At first, I ignored it. Chalked it up to aging parents feeling displaced. But slowly, they stopped acting like guests. Mom started calling it our house. And every time she said it, something in me twisted. I had welcomed them in. But somewhere along the way, they decided it belonged to them too. And now, after that phone call from Eli, I realized they didn't just want to live here. They wanted to take it. It didn't happen overnight. If it had, maybe I would have caught it sooner, called it out, set boundaries. But my mother, Judith, was never one to kick down doors. She preferred slow erosion, quiet redecoration. The kind that doesn't feel like a violation until you look up one day and realize the walls are no longer yours. It started with little things. She rearranged the spice rack. She swapped out the throw pillows in the living room. These match better. She moved my wedding photo off the mantel and replaced it with a smiling group shot of our extended family. David's face, once the quiet centerpiece, was suddenly gone. When I moved the photo back, she smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't realize that picture meant that much to you." like it didn't mark the last moment of real joy in my life. And then came the comments. Soft, strategic. Liam really thrives around other kids. I just hate that Vanessa's apartment is so cramped. You're such a strong woman, Sophia, but this house can't be easy to maintain alone. Maybe the boys need to learn to share. It builds character. At first, I shrugged them off. My legal mind knew manipulation when it saw it, but it's different when it comes wrapped in motherly concern. Besides, I had more pressing things. Back-to-back trials, parent-teacher meetings, the never-ending juggle of solo parenting. Then Vanessa and Liam arrived. Judith said it was just temporary. Vanessa had lost her job again and her ex-husband had stopped child support. I didn't ask questions. I gave up the second guest room and bit my tongue. The day they moved in, my boys offered to help carry boxes. I was proud of them, how generous, how kind. That night, my mother made a full roast dinner for Vanessa and Liam. Not a plate was set for Eli or Caleb. She looked at me, blinking. Oh, I assumed they already ate. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. From then on, everything shifted. Vanessa and Liam became the favored unit. Liam's tantrums were excused. My boys were told to lower their voices, even in their own rooms. When Caleb brought home a ribbon from the school art fair, no one said a word. But when Liam got a gold star for helping clean up, my mother acted like he'd won a Nobel Prize. My sons began retreating. I'd find Caleb drawing alone behind closed doors. Eli stopped asking to have friends over. The laughter in the house, the warm, chaotic noise that David once loved, was thinning out like old paint. I tried to bring it up once. Mom, I think the boys feel pushed out. Judith's eyes sharpened. Sophia, that's an awful accusation. We love all our grandchildren equally. You're just stressed. Gaslighting. Polished and practiced. It was Harper, me friend and colleague, who finally said it aloud. They're not guests anymore, she told me over coffee. They're squatting in your life, and they're slowly taking it. That was the first time I admitted it wasn't just my house at stake. It was my role as mother, my place as protector. And I was losing it. If the house had felt off before, Liam's arrival made it tilt entirely. He came barreling in with a suitcase, a tablet, and a long list of allergies, preferences, and emotional sensitivities Judith recited like scripture. Liam doesn't do well with loud sounds, she warned the boys. He needs quiet time after lunch. Don't take his things without askings. He's very protective of his space. Space. That word echoed in my head. The same woman who said Caleb and Eli didn't need their own rooms was now fiercely guarding Liam's space, which included both a bedroom and a play nook in the sunroom. She rearranged the furniture to suit him, hung up his artwork on the hallway wall, and asked me to consider turning our basement into a playroom. For Liam, I'd already told them the basement was off limits. It had flooded once, and I didn't want the boys down there. Judith's reply, it's fine now. And besides, it's not like your sons use it. My sons. I was starting to notice she rarely said their names anymore. One evening, I came home from a court hearing to find Liam riding Caleb's scooter outside, in socks while Vanessa scrolled on her phone. I asked where Caleb was. In his room, Vanessa said, not even looking up. He said he didn't want to come out. Caleb's room, I later found, had been picked through. His shelves rearranged, his sketchbooks shoved aside to make space for Liam's dinosaur collection. When I confronted Judith, she shrugged. They're cousins. Sharing is healthy. Not when one child's presence erases the other. Eli tried to speak up once calmly, maturely. He told Judith that it wasn't fair how she celebrated every tiny thing Liam did but ignored them. Young man, she snapped. You need to learn that life isn't always fair. The irony nearly choked me. When I tried to bring it up during dinner, Glenn, father tapped his fork and muttered, let's just try to have a peaceful meal, as if peace required silence, as if dissent was disruption. That night, Eli knocked on my bedroom door. He stood there, lanky and brave, holding his baseball glove. Mom, he said, can we move out? I sat up straight. What do you mean? Just us. Me, you, Caleb, somewhere else. Anywhere else. My heart broke. Not because he wanted to leave, but because I had let it come to this. I told Harper everything the next day over soup neither of us touched. She listened in that razor-sharp, observant way only lawyers do. "They're building a case," she said bluntly. "Not legal, emotional. They're slowly writing you out of the center of your own home." I stared down at my untouched spoon. "You need to protect yourself, Sophia. And your boys." I knew she was right. I just hadn't realized how far it had gone until I walked into the living room that evening and saw Caleb's drawing torn in half, Liam standing over it, and Vanessa saying, "Well, maybe he shouldn't leave his things lying around." That was the first time I raised my voice. But it wouldn't be the last. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of noise, ironically. The house was too quiet. Caleb had cried himself to sleep, and Eli had locked his door for the first time in his life. The silence rang louder than any argument. I sat on the edge of my bed, the hallway light seeping under the door, and stared at the family photo David took on our last vacation. We were all wearing matching flannel shirts, even though Eli had rolled his eyes at the idea. David had insisted. "We're a team," he'd said. That photo was gone from the hallway now, replaced by a framed print of Liam's kindergarten graduation. At 2:11 a.m., I sent Harper a text. "We need to activate the plan. Tomorrow." We joked about it before, called it Situation X, a worst-case protocol, a strategy for the day when lines were crossed too far. I think a part of me hoped we'd never use it. The next morning, I met Harper in her office before the sun came up. She handed me a cup of coffee and a thick folder labeled SJX, my initials, the contingency. "We start by protecting the deed," she said crisply. "I've pulled a certified copy, it's only in your name. Your grandmother's will explicitly states the inheritance went to you, not the family." I nodded, my grip tightening on the folder. "Next, we log evidence," she continued, "documenting every pattern of behavior. The favoritism, the neglect, the way they've undermined your parenting." "But how do you prove intention?" I asked. She looked at me for a beat. "I already have," she said, sliding a small recorder across the desk. "Corinne, your neighbor, called me last night. She overheard your mother on the phone with her sister." Judith said, and I quote, "Sophia's too soft. We'll reset the house the way it should be. Vanessa and Liam will make it a real home again." My stomach turned. I should have felt outraged. Instead, I felt numb, like something that had been rotting under the floorboards was finally being exposed. "What's next?" I asked. "Guardianship," Harper replied. "We prepare documentation asserting your full legal and physical custody of your sons. If Judith ever tries to weaponize your kids in court, we shut that door before it even opens." I looked at the to-do list she had printed, typed neatly in bullet points. Every line felt like armor. Before I left her office, I looked Harper in the eye and asked, "Am I doing the right thing?" She didn't blink. "You're doing the thing they never expected. You're fighting back. You're a mother, Sophia, not a martyr." The words sank into me like steel. By evening, I had hidden copies of all legal documents in a fireproof lockbox in my trunk. I'd backed up the audio files. I'd told Eli and Caleb to pack an overnight bag just in case. And when Judith called out at dinner, "Sophia, Liam's out of applesauce, could you pick some up on your way back from work?" Like I was her personal assistant. I just smiled. Because for the first time in weeks, I had something they didn't. A plan. I pulled into the driveway just before 5:00 p.m., deliberately leaving the car parked along the curb instead of in the garage. This wasn't a return, it was a confrontation. The house looked deceptively calm. Golden light spilled from the windows, the kind David used to call movie magic. But I knew better. Inside, my sons were under siege. And tonight, it ended. I walked up the front path, the briefcase in my hand heavier than usual, not because of files, but because of what it represented. Proof, resolve, boundaries. Before I even reached the front door, it opened. Judith stood there, beaming like she'd just finished redecorating for better homes, gardens. Sophia, perfect timing. We were just finishing up Liam's room. He's so thrilled to finally have some space of his own. Behind her, Glenn hovered like a shadow, eyes flicking nervously between us. Vanessa was lounging on the couch, scrolling on her phone as if this was her home. I didn't respond. My eyes scanned the hallway, and then I saw them, Eli and Caleb. They were sitting on the stairs, backpacks at their feet like evacuees. Caleb's eyes were red-rimmed, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. Eli sat rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. I stepped past my mother without a word, and crouched in front of them. "Are you both okay?" I asked softly. Caleb shook his head. "They threw our stuff in the basement," he whispered. "Grandma said we're too old to need our own rooms, that Liam needs them more." "My baseball glove?" Eli added, his voice low with fury. "The one Dad signed, it's in a box next to a can of motor oil." I closed my eyes, just for a moment. A wave of heat and ice surged through my veins. When I stood up, I didn't face Judith. Not yet. I turned to my sons. "Go grab your overnight bags, chargers, school clothes. We're not staying here tonight." Judith laughed at a sharp, dismissive sound. "Don't be ridiculous, Sophia. You're being dramatic. There's no need for theatrics." I met her eyes, calm, unwavering. "This isn't a performance. It's a boundary." Vanessa scoffed from the couch. "So what? You're taking the boys to a hotel because Liam got a better room?" "No," I said. "I'm taking them somewhere they're respected." Judith's smile faltered. "We were trying to help. Vanessa and Liam need stability. You know how hard things have been for them." "And what about Eli and Caleb?" I asked. "Do they not deserve stability? Are they just placeholders until your golden grandchild gets his throne?" Glenn finally spoke. "Sophia, come on. Let's talk about this like adults." "We're past talking," I said. "You cross the line, and you don't get to decide who belongs in this house." "You're throwing away your family over bedrooms?" Judith snapped. I stared at her. "You threw them away first." Just then, Eli and Caleb returned, bags slung over their shoulders. Caleb reached out and took my hand. Eli stood beside me like a soldier. Judith took a step forward. "Sophia Jameson, if you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. You'll regret this." I turned, opened the door, and looked back one last time. My boys are my family, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect them, even if it means protecting them from you. Then, I walked out. As the door clicked shut behind me, it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a beginning. The next morning, Harper's conference room felt like a war room. We weren't two women going up against a manipulative family. We were counsel and client, strategists and soldiers. The windows overlooked downtown Denver, but my focus stayed on the thick folders in front of me. Financials, call logs, recorded conversations, legal documents. "Once we file this," Harper said, tapping her pen against the demand letter, "there's no turning back. They'll come in swinging." I gave a slow nod. "Let them. I've spent too long being quiet. It's time they heard me loud and clear." We filed an official notice through Harper's firm, a formal request for mediation to discuss the terms of my parents' and sisters' continued occupancy, or rather, their mandatory departure. The letter was served by a process server at 7:00 p.m. sharp. They'd just sat down to dinner. Judith's response came that night in a flurry of furious texts. "How dare you humiliate us like this? You're being influenced by that lawyer friend of yours. We're family, Sophia. We can fix this. Don't destroy everything." I didn't respond. The only reply she received was an automatic out-of-office message. "All future communication must be directed to legal counsel." The silence afterward was eerie. Then came the meeting. Judith and Glenn arrived with a lawyer named Mr. Levinson, a man who clearly thought he was entering a routine family squabble. Vanessa followed behind them, clutching a Starbucks and a giant purse like she was heading to brunch, not mediation. I wore my courtroom suit. No makeup, no smile. Harper opened the meeting. "Thank you for coming. Our objective today is to present non-negotiable terms for your voluntary departure from Ms. Jameson's property. Mr. Levinson chuckled. Surely we're not here to evict a woman's own parents. Harper slid a binder across the table. We're here to correct the record. First, the deed. She opened to the notarized copy. Sophia is the sole legal owner. The property was purchased using inheritance clearly designated to her by her grandmother. No co-signers, no contribution from the parties currently residing there. Levinson's smile thinned. Judith shifted in her seat. Second, Harper continued, flipping to another tab. Bank records. You claimed financial hardship, yet maintain a joint savings account with over 50, and receive a monthly annuity. Not only is this deceptive, but it suggests a deliberate effort to manipulate access to Sophia's assets. Glenn muttered, "This is ridiculous." Vanessa yawned. Third, Harper's voice hardened. We have a recorded conversation. Your client, Mrs. Judith Green, was overheard saying, "We'll reset the house the way it should be. Vanessa and Liam will make it a real home again." Levinson blinked. Are you saying you? Yes, I cut in. We have legal audio evidence, and we also have text threads between Vanessa and my mother discussing ways to convince my sons to let go of their bedrooms permanently. The air in the room turned icy. I'm offering a clean exit, I said. You vacate the house within 14 days. No contact with me or my children. In return, I don't file civil charges for fraud and property interference. Judith's voice cracked. You'd do that to your own mother? Harper leaned forward. She's doing what a mother should, protecting her children. Glenn said nothing. For once, he couldn't look at me. Vanessa stood, her face red. You're unbelievable, Sophia. After everything we've done for you? I stood too. You've done nothing for me. And everything to me. You took advantage of my grief, my kindness, my silence. But that ends today. Mr. Levinson slowly closed his folder. We accept the terms. The meeting ended not with an apology or a hug but with a signature. One that meant I had my house back. And my power. If silence had a sound, it would have filled my house that week. Judith moved like a wounded queen, drifting from room to room with tragic sighs and deliberate footsteps. She no longer spoke to me directly through cold glances or whispered guilt trips within earshot. Vanessa, on the other hand, refused to acknowledge anything had changed. She blasted music while packing, complained about the inconvenience, and left passive-aggressive sticky notes like, Liam loved this kitchen once. Only Glenn seemed to shrink into himself. He barely spoke. I caught him once, standing in the boys' doorway, staring at the pencil marks on the doorframe David's old growth chart. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something I couldn't name. Shame, maybe, or clarity. But the shift that mattered most wasn't in them. It was in my sons. Eli started leaving his door open again. Caleb sang while he sketched, letting the house hear his voice once more. They had reclaimed more than rooms, they were reclaiming their sense of belonging. Then, 2 days before the deadline, a soft knock came on my guest room door. It was Glenn. He held a suitcase in one hand and didn't meet my eyes. We're packed, he said simply. I'm taking Judith to my sister's for a while. Vanessa's making arrangements with a friend. We'll all be gone before the 14 days. I nodded. He hesitated. Sophia. I should have said something sooner. I knew what Judith was doing. I didn't stop her. I didn't protect you. Or your boys. I'm sorry. His voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time in years, I saw him not as a father, but as a man struggling under years of silence. You were complicit, I said softly. But maybe this is your start. He nodded again and turned to go. As he walked out, Caleb peeked from behind the hallway wall and watched him disappear. Later that evening, Vanessa left without a word. Judith, however, had one final performance left in her. As she dragged the last suitcase to the door, she paused, staring at the family photo on the wall, David's favorite. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice bitter as ash. You chose a house over your family. I stepped into the doorway behind her. No, I chose my family over your fantasy. You were the ones who forgot what love is supposed to look like. Behind me, Eli and Caleb stood shoulder to shoulder. Judith looked at them, really looked at them for a split second. But whatever softness might have lived in her cracked years ago, she walked out without another word. And when I closed the door behind her, the lock clicking into place felt like the first breath I'd taken in 2 years. Peace didn't come in a roar. It came in stillness. In paint swatches on the table. In sketchbooks left open on the counter. In my son's laughter echoing up the stairs again. My house was mine again. And this time, I wasn't just defending bricks and wood. I was defending joy. I didn't expect healing to feel so quiet. There was no grand parade, no victory speech. Just small, ordinary moments, slowly stitching themselves into something whole. Caleb humming while brushing his teeth. Eli asking to host a sleepover. Me sipping coffee on the back porch without looking over my shoulder. A week after they left, I took the boys to the hardware store. Pick any color, I told them. Your walls, your rules. Eli went for a deep navy. Like midnight, he said. Caleb picked a vibrant forest green. Like an adventure, he grinned. We spent the weekend painting, blasting music, ordering too much pizza, making messes David would have teased us about. At one point, I looked over and saw paint smeared across Caleb's cheek, Eli laughing so hard he had to sit down. We weren't just painting rooms. We were reclaiming sacred space with joy. The next week, we visited Dr. Harris, our family therapist. I expected resistance, especially from Eli, who was firmly in his "nothing's wrong, I'm fine" phase. But when we sat in that calm, book-lined office, the truth came pouring out. I was mad, Eli admitted. Not just at them. At you, Mom. I didn't understand why you let it happen for so long. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. You had every right to be. Caleb was quieter. I just missed when Grandma used to read comics with me, before everything got weird. Dr. Harris called it what it was, a betrayal of trust, but he reminded the boys, and me, that protecting boundaries is love too. That real family isn't defined by blood, but by presence, respect, and safety. And slowly, the guilt inside me began to lift. A few weeks later, Harper nudged me into joining a support group for widowed parents. You've been holding everything up alone for 5 years, she said. Let someone hold space for you too. That's where I met Ben. A landscape architect with 2 daughters, and a quiet steadiness I hadn't realized I missed. We didn't fall into anything quickly, just conversations over coffee, texts that made me smile, long walks while our kids raced ahead. There was no pressure, no pretending, just 2 people learning to breathe again. One Sunday evening, the 6 of us were at the parkour kids flying a kite that kept nosediving into the grass. I laughed, the sound catching me off guard. I hadn't heard myself like that in years. You seem lighter? Ben said. I looked around. Eli teaching Caleb how to catch the wind. Ben's daughters squealing as the kite finally lifted. And the sun dipping low behind them, painting the sky with gold. I am, I said, and meant it. That night, back home, I stood in the hallway outside the boys' rooms. The air smelled like fresh paint and laundry. David's photo was back in the hallway, right where it belonged. And for the first time since he passed, I didn't feel like I was barely surviving. I felt like I was living. And I whispered into the quiet. I kept the house, I kept the promise, and I kept our boys safe.